ecological systems far beyond the immediate mining site. The Congo, therefore, presents a paradox. It is one of the world's most important natural regions, yet many of the people living within it face severe economic challenges. It contains resources essential to modern civilization, yet extraction can expose workers to extraordinary risks. It is globally important, but many of its environmental realities remain poorly understood. The deeper we look, the harder it becomes to separate nature from human activity. And then we reach one of the most fascinating questions of all. What existed here before modern maps, modern borders, and modern technology? For centuries, outsiders imagined the interior of Central Africa as a blank space, but it was never truly empty. People lived here, traveled through these forests, traded along rivers, developed local systems of knowledge, and adapted to environments that outsiders struggled to understand. The idea of a completely unknown Congo often says more about the limitations of outside observers than about the people who already knew the land. Historical expeditions attempted to map rivers and establish routes through territories that were difficult to navigate. Some explorers returned with new geographical information. Others faced disease, difficult terrain, conflict, and extreme logistical challenges. Some expeditions ended without the answers they were searching for. This history contributed to stories about hidden settlements, abandoned routes, unusual clearings, and structures swallowed by vegetation. Tropical forests are exceptionally effective at destroying physical evidence. Wood decays. Buildings collapse. Roads disappear under vegetation. Soil is disturbed by roots and water. What might have been obvious to someone living there centuries ago can become almost invisible to an archaeologist today. This does not mean every story of the lost city is true. It means the environment creates genuine archaeological challenges. Modern technology is beginning to change that. Satellite imagery can identify subtle differences in vegetation. Remote sensing can detect variations in elevation. Advanced mapping techniques can reveal patterns that are almost impossible to recognize from the ground. A perfectly straight line beneath vegetation, an unusual geometric shape, or a difference in plant growth can sometimes indicate something worth investigating. But the discovery of a pattern is only the beginning. Researchers still have to determine what caused it. Nature itself can create remarkable geometry. Fallen trees, erosion, flooding, geological processes, and vegetation patterns can all produce shapes that look artificial from above. Without ground verification, interpretation remains uncertain. This is where the Congo becomes particularly fascinating. It forces researchers to resist the temptation to turn every unexplained pattern into a sensational discovery. A mysterious shape is not automatically a lost city. An unusual sound is not automatically an unknown creature. An unexplored region is not automatically hiding something extraordinary. The real mystery is often more subtle. How much information is missing before we can confidently decide what something actually is? Indigenous communities provide another important layer of knowledge. People who have lived within the forest for generations possess detailed understanding of seasonal rivers, animal behavior, plants, weather patterns, and dangerous terrain. Their knowledge is often passed through observation and experience rather than written scientific documentation. To an outsider, someone predicting rain by observing insects or identifying an animal's presence from a tiny sound may appear almost impossible. But these skills are based on repeated exposure. The forest becomes a language made from patterns. This idea is sometimes described as listening to the forest. It does not necessarily mean hearing a literal voice. It means paying attention to signals that inexperienced observers might ignore. A bird suddenly becoming silent can matter. A change in insect activity can matter. A shift in wind direction can matter. A change in water color can matter. None of these observations are supernatural. They are environmental information. And yet, when scientific technology enters the same environment, an interesting situation emerges. Sensors may record temperature, humidity, sound, movement, and atmospheric conditions, while local observers interpret changes through experience. These are different systems of knowledge, but they can sometimes describe the same environment from different perspectives. The Congo therefore challenges another assumption, that knowledge only counts when it comes from a laboratory. Sometimes the laboratory is the forest itself. But even the people who know this environment best cannot control it, because the Congo changes constantly. And that is where the next mystery begins. There are places in the Congo Basin where simply reaching the location can become the greatest scientific challenge. A map may show a route, but the ground can tell a different story. A river may have shifted. A flooded area may have expanded. A path may have disappeared beneath vegetation. A clearing visible from satellite imagery may be surrounded by terrain that makes access almost impossible. This is one of the reasons why the phrase unmapped needs to be understood carefully. Modern satellites have photographed enormous portions of the Congo Basin. The region is not literally absent from every map. The real problem is that high-resolution, ground-verified information is uneven. A satellite can tell you that a forest exists. It may not tell you exactly what is happening beneath the canopy. A drone can fly over an area. It may not be able to remain airborne through severe weather. A research team can reach a remote location, but it may only observe that location during one season. This creates a strange scientific problem. A place can be visible without being fully understood. Seasonal flooding makes this even more complicated. The Congo River system is enormous, and water levels can transform landscapes. Areas accessible during one period can become isolated during another. Temporary wetlands appear and disappear. Animal migration changes. Vegetation responds to rainfall. The same coordinates on a map can represent a surprisingly different environment months later. This means exploration cannot always be treated as a single expedition. To truly understand a dynamic ecosystem, researchers need repeated observations over time. And repeated observation is expensive. It requires people, equipment, transportation, funding, communication systems, and long-term commitment. In remote areas, even basic logistics can become difficult. Roads may not exist. Fuel and supplies have to be transported. Weather can delay operations. Equipment can fail. Communications can be unreliable. Every one of these limitations creates gaps in knowledge. But those gaps should not automatically be interpreted as evidence of something mysterious. Sometimes the most honest scientific answer is simply, we do not have enough data yet. That answer may sound less exciting than a hidden civilization or an unknown creature, but it is actually one of the most important ideas in the entire story. Unknown does not mean impossible. Unexplained does not mean supernatural. Unmapped does not mean invisible. And a mystery does not become less interesting simply because science has a reasonable explanation for part of it. In fact, the opposite may be true. The Congo shows us how complicated reality can become when thousands of natural processes interact simultaneously. Weather affects rivers. Rivers affect forests. Forests affect wildlife. Wildlife affects vegetation. Human activity changes habitats. Climate influences all of them. Trying to isolate one variable can be incredibly difficult. This is why researchers increasingly use multiple methods at the same time. Satellite observations can be combined with field surveys. Acoustic monitoring can be combined with wildlife tracking. Soil samples can be compared with vegetation changes. Historical records can be examined alongside modern environmental data. No single method is enough. The forest has too many layers, and some of the most fascinating discoveries emerge only when those layers begin to overlap. That brings us to the animals themselves, because the Congo contains creatures whose behavior can be every bit as fascinating as the environment surrounding them. Imagine walking through dense forest when suddenly every sound disappears. No birds, no insects, no distant calls. For a few seconds, the rainforest seems completely still. To someone unfamiliar with the environment, this silence can feel terrifying. But silence in nature can have many explanations. A predator may be nearby. Weather conditions may have changed. Animals may simply be responding to something outside human perception. Wildlife often detects environmental changes before people do. This is especially interesting in chimpanzees and other highly intelligent species. Chimpanzees live in complex social systems. They recognize individuals, form relationships, cooperate, compete, and learn from one another. Their behavior demonstrates memory and flexibility that make them one of the closest living comparisons to our own social intelligence. Tool use is one of the clearest examples. A chimpanzee may select an object and use it for a specific purpose. The ability to understand that one object can change another requires more than simple physical strength. It involves a relationship between action and consequence. Even more fascinating is the fact that different chimpanzee groups can develop different behavioral traditions. A behavior common in one group may be rare or absent in another. Young animals learn by watching older individuals. This suggests that intelligence in the Congo is not simply a human phenomenon. The forest contains multiple forms of problem solving. Birds navigate enormous distances. Elephants remember landscapes and water sources. Primates develop social strategies. Insects respond to chemical signals. Plants interact with their environment in ways that scientists continue to study. The ecosystem itself behaves like a massive network of information. But the Congo also contains reports of phenomena that are much harder to interpret. People working deep in rainforest environments sometimes describe strange, low-frequency sounds, sudden vibrations, unusual echoes, or moments when ordinary sounds seem to change direction. Some of these experiences can be explained by the physics of dense vegetation, atmospheric conditions, geological activity, distant thunder, or the unusual way sound travels through humid environments. The human brain also plays a role. When visibility is poor and familiar reference points disappear, our perception of distance and direction becomes less reliable. A sound can seem close when it is far away. An echo can appear to come from the wrong direction. Movement in the canopy can be difficult to locate. This does not make the experience imaginary. It means the environment can distort the information reaching our senses. Researchers therefore have to distinguish between the experience itself and the explanation for that experience. Someone genuinely heard something. The scientific question is, what produced it? That distinction is critical. The Congo is full of observations that are real even when their causes are uncertain. And sometimes, the explanation is not waiting somewhere in the forest. It is waiting inside the way humans perceive the forest. This brings us to another discovery: the power of environmental perception. For generations, people living in rainforest communities have developed extraordinary awareness of subtle changes. They can recognize paths through dense vegetation, identify animal presence from traces, understand seasonal conditions, and predict environmental changes from signals that outsiders might ignore. This is not magic. It is expertise. A person who spends thousands of hours in a particular environment develops a mental database that is difficult to reproduce quickly through technology. Modern researchers sometimes spend years learning how to interpret a single ecosystem. Local knowledge may have been accumulated over generations. When these systems are combined responsibly, they can provide a much richer understanding of the environment. But there is also a danger. If unfamiliar knowledge is automatically labeled mysterious, people can turn practical environmental expertise into something supernatural. That does not respect the knowledge itself. The more interesting conclusion is that human intelligence can adapt to environments in radically different ways. The Congo does not simply challenge science. It challenges our assumptions about what expertise looks like. And the deeper we go, the more this becomes a story about perception rather than fear. Because perhaps the most terrifying discovery is not that the Congo contains things we cannot explain. Perhaps it is realizing how much of the world we misunderstand simply because we are not looking at it in the right way. By now, a pattern should be emerging. The Congo does not hide everything. It reveals things slowly. A river changes. A forest grows over history. An animal reacts before humans notice a threat. A mining operation exposes the hidden cost of technology. A satellite detects a pattern that demands investigation. A local observer notices something that a machine misses. A scientist gathers data but still needs more. Each discovery adds another layer. And that may be the most important reason the Congo remains one of the most fascinating regions on Earth. The mystery is not concentrated in one location. It is distributed across the entire system, under the ground, inside the rivers, above the canopy, within animal behavior, inside human history, and even inside the technology used to study it. One of the strangest things about exploring a place like the Congo is that every answer can create another question. Discover a new species, and you immediately need to know how it evolved. Map a previously difficult region, and you discover new environmental patterns. Identify an unusual sound, and you need to determine its physical source. Find evidence of historical human activity, and you need to understand who lived there, when they lived there, and how the environment changed around them. Study the forest, and you discover that climate, soil, water, plants, and animals are all connected. There is no final puzzle piece, only more connections. This is why scientists often describe ecological research as an ongoing process rather than a search for a single dramatic conclusion. The Congo Basin is too large and too dynamic for one expedition to capture everything. Instead, knowledge accumulates. One data set, one observation, one season, one expedition, one satellite image, one soil sample, one behavioral study. Over decades, these pieces begin to form a larger picture. But the picture is never completely finished. And there is something strangely beautiful about that. Human civilization has become extremely good at mapping, measuring, recording, and predicting. We have satellites orbiting Earth. We have sensors capable of detecting tiny environmental changes. We can monitor forests from space and analyze DNA at microscopic scales. Yet, there are still environments where certainty has limits. Not because science has failed, because reality is more complicated than our instruments can capture at any single moment. The Congo Basin demonstrates this perfectly. It is not a frozen museum. It is alive. It changes every day. Rain falls. Rivers rise. Trees fall. New plants grow. Animals move. Soil changes. Humans extract resources. Climate conditions shift. Every process affects another. The forest is therefore not a collection of objects. It is a system. And systems are difficult to understand when you only examine one piece at a time. This realization changes the meaning of the word discovery. A discovery does not always mean finding something completely unknown. Sometimes discovery means realizing that something you thought you understood is much more complicated than you imagined. The Congo contains thousands of examples of this. The river is not simply water moving downstream. The forest is not simply trees. A chimpanzee is not simply an animal. A mine is not simply a hole in the ground. A satellite image is not simply a picture. A local story is not automatically a myth. And an unexplained event is not automatically evidence of something impossible. Every observation exists inside a larger context. That is where responsible exploration begins. Not with the assumption that something extraordinary must be hiding, but with the willingness to investigate what is actually there. And perhaps that is what makes the Congo more unsettling than any fictional mystery. Because fiction gives you an ending. The Congo does not. There are still areas requiring deeper research. There are ecosystems whose interactions are not completely understood. There are historical questions waiting for stronger evidence. There are species still being studied. There are environmental changes that scientists are monitoring. There are communities whose knowledge deserves greater recognition. And there are enormous challenges surrounding conservation, economic development, and resource extraction. The questions continue. And as technology improves, the answers will become clearer. But new questions will appear at the same time. That is how exploration works. The closer you get, the larger the landscape becomes. The more you understand, the more you realize how much remains outside your frame. So imagine the Congo one final time. Not as a mysterious green void on a map, not as a place filled with monsters or supernatural secrets, but as something far more extraordinary. A living system stretching across millions of hectares. A place where ancient ecological processes continue alongside modern technology. A place where rivers reshape landscapes, forests store immense amounts of carbon, animals demonstrate remarkable intelligence, and human communities carry generations of environmental knowledge. A place where valuable minerals extracted from the ground can eventually become part of the devices that connect the modern world. A place where history can disappear beneath vegetation and later reappear through modern scientific methods. A place where satellites can see patterns that humans cannot see from the ground, while local observers can recognize signals that machines may overlook. And a place where uncertainty is not necessarily a weakness. It is part of the reality. The Congo does not need a mythical creature to be terrifying. It does not need a hidden civilization to be fascinating. It does not need a supernatural explanation to remain mysterious. Its real story is already powerful enough. Because the most unsettling truth is that even in an age of satellites, artificial intelligence, advanced sensors, and global communication, there are still places where our understanding remains incomplete. Not empty, not unknowable, just incomplete. And perhaps that is the greatest discovery of all. The world is still bigger than our maps, still more complicated than our models, still more interconnected than our categories. The Congo Basin reminds us that exploration is not about reaching the moment when every question disappears. It is about learning how to ask better questions. And somewhere beneath the endless canopy, along a river that has been flowing long before modern civilization existed, another observation may already be waiting. Another species, another geological clue, another archaeological pattern, another environmental change, another piece of evidence that forces scientists to look again. Because the Congo does not end with an answer. It continues. And so does the mystery. There is another side of the Congo that becomes visible only when you stop looking at the forest as a landscape and start looking at it as a record of time. Every layer of soil, every riverbank, every unusual clearing, and every change in vegetation can preserve clues about what happened there long before anyone arrived with a camera or satellite. The difficulty is that the Congo does not preserve its past in the way deserts or dry climates sometimes do. Here, nature is constantly rewriting the evidence. Rain enters the soil. Roots grow through old surfaces. Trees fall and create new openings. Rivers flood their banks and move sediment from one location to another. Organic material decomposes rapidly. A structure that might survive for centuries in a dry environment can disappear beneath vegetation in the Congo. This creates one of the most unusual archaeological problems on Earth. The absence of visible ruins does not necessarily mean the absence of human history. It may simply mean the forest has erased the evidence. This possibility has changed the way researchers think about ancient human activity in Central Africa. Instead of searching only for large stone structures or obvious ruins, scientists can examine the landscape itself. Soil chemistry can reveal repeated human disturbance. Certain vegetation patterns can indicate previous agricultural activity. Charcoal deposits can provide clues about ancient fires. Changes in pollen can reveal how plant communities responded to human activity over time. Each clue is small, but when several clues appear together, they can tell a much larger story. Imagine standing in a part of the rainforest that looks completely untouched. Trees surround you in every direction. There are no walls, no roads, no buildings, and no obvious signs that humans were ever there. Yet beneath your feet, the soil may contain traces of activity that occurred hundreds or even thousands of years ago. The forest may have hidden the evidence, but it did not necessarily erase everything. This is one reason the Congo remains so important to archaeology and anthropology. It challenges the assumption that ancient civilizations always leave behind dramatic monuments. Human history can exist in much quieter forms. A modified landscape, a repeatedly used path, a changed soil layer, a concentration of charcoal, a pattern of vegetation that does not fit the surrounding forest. None of these discoveries immediately reveal a lost city, but they can reveal something perhaps even more important. People were shaping these environments long before modern maps existed, and that realization changes the meaning of the word untouched. A forest can appear untouched while still carrying thousands of years of human history. But history is not the only thing hidden beneath the Congo. The ground itself contains another mystery. The geological history of the region stretches back far beyond human civilization. Beneath the soil are ancient rocks, mineral deposits, underground structures, and geological processes that developed over enormous periods of time. Some formations are visible at the surface, while others remain buried beneath layers of sediment and vegetation. Because direct observation is difficult, scientists often rely on indirect evidence to reconstruct what lies below. Magnetic measurements can reveal differences in underground materials. Gravity measurements can indicate variations in density. Seismic techniques can help researchers understand structures beneath the surface. Satellite data can reveal subtle changes in elevation. Each method provides another piece of the underground picture. But the deeper the investigation goes, the more complicated the system becomes. The Congo is not geologically simple. Its river systems interact with enormous floodplains. Sediment is constantly transported. Water changes the surface. Erosion removes material from one location and deposits it somewhere else. Over extremely long periods, these processes can completely transform landscapes. This means that even the ground beneath the rainforest has a history of movement. And that movement can sometimes produce features that appear mysterious when viewed without context. An unusual depression may be geological. A strange ridge may be the result of ancient water movement. A perfectly shaped clearing may have a natural explanation. A sudden change in vegetation may be connected to differences in soil composition. The challenge is determining which explanation fits the evidence. This is where science becomes less about dramatic discoveries and more about patience. A photograph can create a mystery in seconds. Solving it can take years. Researchers may need to return to the same location repeatedly, collect samples, compare historical data, and examine environmental conditions across different seasons. Sometimes the result is disappointing from a sensational perspective. The mysterious feature turns out to be completely natural. But even then, something has been discovered. Because understanding how a natural system creates unusual patterns can be just as important as finding something genuinely unknown. And the Congo repeatedly demonstrates this principle. The deeper scientists investigate, the more they encounter phenomena that appear extraordinary until the surrounding context becomes clear. But there are also moments when the evidence remains incomplete. One of the most difficult categories involves biological discoveries. The Congo Basin contains extraordinary biodiversity, and scientists continue to document species, populations, behaviors, and ecological relationships. Some discoveries are completely new species. Others involve animals already known to science but behaving in ways that reveal something previously overlooked. A species does not have to be unknown to be surprising. Sometimes the discovery is about behavior. An animal may use a tool in an unexpected way. A population may occupy a habitat previously considered unsuitable. A species may interact with another species in a previously undocumented relationship. A genetic study may reveal that what scientists considered one population is actually several distinct lineages. Each discovery changes the scientific picture. And then there are reports that are much harder to evaluate. For generations, people living near rivers and deep forests have described unusual animals, strange movements, or creatures that were difficult to identify. Some reports may have ordinary explanations. A known species seen briefly can look completely different when visibility is poor. Large fish can create enormous disturbances. Crocodiles, snakes, hippos, and other animals can become difficult to identify accurately when viewed from a moving boat or through dense vegetation. Human perception is not a perfect recording device. The brain fills gaps. It creates patterns. It makes rapid assumptions. And in an environment where visibility can disappear within seconds, misidentification becomes especially likely. But dismissing every unusual report would also be a mistake. The correct response is investigation. What was actually observed? Where did it happen? How many people saw it? Were there physical traces? Can the event be repeated? Is there photographic or biological evidence? These questions separate a fascinating story from a scientific discovery. And this distinction becomes increasingly important as technology gives more people the ability to record what they see. A camera can capture an event that previously would have existed only as a story. A drone can survey an area that once required days of travel. An acoustic sensor can record sounds continuously. A satellite can monitor changes over enormous distances. The Congo is therefore entering a new era of observation. But greater observation does not automatically mean complete understanding. In fact, it can create the opposite effect. The more researchers see, the more complexity becomes visible. Satellite imagery may reveal thousands of variations in vegetation. Environmental sensors may record changes that were previously invisible. Wildlife tracking can show movement patterns across enormous territories. Climate models can reveal interactions between rainfall and forest behavior. Instead of producing one simple answer, these technologies generate enormous amounts of information. The problem shifts from finding data to understanding it. And that may be one of the greatest challenges facing modern Congo research. There is simply too much complexity to reduce everything to a single explanation. The forest is not one mystery. It is millions of interconnected processes happening simultaneously. A tree grows because of sunlight, water, nutrients, temperature, microorganisms, and biological interactions. An animal moves because of food, predators, social relationships, weather, and habitat. A river changes because of rainfall, terrain, sediment, vegetation, and seasonal cycles. A human community changes its behavior according to economic conditions, environmental pressure, culture, and access to resources. Everything influences something else. And when all of these interactions occur together, prediction becomes extremely difficult. This is why the Congo is so valuable scientifically. It is not merely a place where scientists can search for unusual discoveries. It is a natural laboratory for understanding complexity itself. The forest shows what happens when biological systems, climate, geography, and human activity operate simultaneously across enormous distances. But there is a darker side to this complexity. The Congo is also experiencing pressure from human activity. Deforestation, agricultural expansion, infrastructure development, hunting, mining, and climate change can all alter ecosystems. Some changes are visible immediately. Others develop slowly. A forest may lose small areas over time, but the consequences can accumulate. Habitat becomes fragmented. Animal populations become isolated. Migration routes change. Food sources become less predictable. Water systems are disturbed. The effects may not appear dramatic in a single photograph. But ecological systems do not respond only to individual events. They respond to accumulation. This creates another unsettling question. What happens when a system that has adapted over thousands of years is forced to change faster than its species can adapt? The answer is not always predictable. Some species move, some adapt, some decline, some disappear from particular regions, and some changes may not become obvious until years later. This is why conservation in the Congo is not simply about protecting trees. It is about protecting relationships. The relationship between forest and rainfall, between vegetation and wildlife, between rivers and wetlands, between animals and seed dispersal, between communities and natural resources, and between local economies and global demand. The Congo's future, therefore, cannot be separated from the rest of the world. A smartphone, an electric vehicle, a piece of timber, an agricultural product, or an industrial material may seem completely disconnected from a rainforest thousands of kilometers away. But global supply chains can connect them. This is one of the most uncomfortable discoveries in the entire story. Distance does not necessarily mean separation. Modern civilization can be physically far away from the Congo while remaining economically connected to it. The forest may appear remote. The consequences of what happens there are not. And as technology continues to expand, this connection will become even stronger. The same tools that increase pressure on natural resources can also help monitor and protect them. Satellite systems can detect forest loss. Sensors can monitor environmental conditions. Artificial intelligence can process enormous data sets. Genetic analysis can reveal hidden relationships between species. Drones can survey areas that are dangerous or difficult for humans to reach. Technology can therefore become both part of the problem and part of the solution. But technology still has one limitation. It cannot automatically tell us what matters. Data requires interpretation. Interpretation requires context. And context requires understanding the system as a whole. That is why the Congo continues to resist simple answers. It is not merely a remote rainforest. It is a place where history, biology, geology, economics, climate, and human experience overlap. Every layer affects the next. And somewhere within that enormous network, there are still observations waiting to be understood. Some will eventually receive ordinary scientific explanations. Others may reveal genuinely new information. And many will remain uncertain for a long time. But perhaps uncertainty is not the enemy. Perhaps uncertainty is the signal that tells us where we need to look closer. Because every unanswered question creates an opportunity for another expedition, another study, another measurement, another discovery. And somewhere beneath the canopy, beyond the last road, beyond the last reliable trail, there may still be a piece of the Congo that no modern observer has yet understood completely. Not because it belongs to another world, but because this world is far more complicated than we imagined. There is a moment in every expedition when the map stops feeling reliable. The route ahead still exists on paper, but the forest no longer seems to recognize it. A narrow trail disappears beneath vegetation. A stream that was marked as shallow becomes deep after weeks of rain. The coordinates are correct, yet the landscape looks completely different from what the researchers expected. In the Congo Basin, this is not necessarily a failure of navigation. It is a reminder that the environment is changing faster than a map can describe it. And this is where some of the most fascinating discoveries begin. Not with something appearing, but with something that should have been there and is no longer. A clearing can disappear beneath new growth. A riverbank can collapse. A temporary wetland can expand across an old path. Animal trails can shift as food sources move. Even landmarks that seem permanent can change shape over time. The Congo does not simply contain an environment. It continuously creates one. That is why scientists increasingly think about the basin as a dynamic system rather than a fixed geographical object. A map shows location. A living ecosystem shows movement. And movement creates uncertainty. One of the most important examples is the Congo River network. The river does not exist as one simple channel. It is a massive system of connected waterways, floodplains, wetlands, tributaries, islands, and seasonal channels. During periods of heavy rainfall, water spreads into surrounding areas. During drier periods, those same regions can become exposed again. This creates temporary landscapes that may exist for months and then change dramatically. For wildlife, this is not a mystery. It is survival. Animals adapt their movement to water levels. Fish follow changing channels. Birds respond to seasonal resources. Mammals shift their routes according to food and access. For humans, however, this constant movement creates serious challenges. A community that depends on a particular river route must understand its seasonal behavior. A research team planning an expedition must consider water levels. A satellite image taken during one season may look completely different from another. And this creates a strange problem for modern exploration. The more precisely we try to map the Congo, the more obvious it becomes that the map itself is temporary. A location can be accurately measured and still be misunderstood. Because location is only one part of the story. Time matters. Weather matters. Biology matters. And human activity matters. This is one reason researchers rely increasingly on repeated observation. Instead of asking, "What is here?" they ask, "How does this place change?" That question is far more difficult. A single photograph is simple. A decade of environmental data is complicated. But long-term observation can reveal patterns that would otherwise look like random events. A flood may appear unusual when viewed alone. Over many years, it may become part of a predictable cycle. A sudden change in vegetation may seem mysterious. Later analysis may reveal that it follows a recurring rainfall pattern. A wildlife population may seem to disappear. Long-term tracking may show that it simply moved into another part of the ecosystem. This is why some of the Congo's most important discoveries are not dramatic objects. They are patterns. Patterns in rainfall. Patterns in animal movement. Patterns in vegetation. Patterns in river behavior. Patterns in human activity. Once these patterns become visible, the forest begins to make more sense. But even patterns can be misleading. Because the Congo is so large, something that is normal in one region may be unusual in another. This creates a challenge for researchers trying to build models of the entire basin. There is no single Congo environment. There are many. Different soils, different rainfall patterns, different species, different human communities, different histories, different levels of environmental pressure. The basin is therefore a mosaic of systems connected together. Understanding one part does not automatically explain the whole. And that is why discoveries made in one region must be interpreted carefully before they are applied elsewhere. This principle becomes especially important when studying wildlife. The Congo contains some of the most remarkable primate populations on Earth. Chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and other species interact with their environments in complex ways. Their behavior is influenced by social relationships, food availability, predators, climate, and habitat structure. But their behavior also tells researchers something about the forest itself. If a population suddenly changes its movement patterns, researchers can investigate what changed in the environment. Maybe food became scarce. Maybe humans entered the area. Maybe another animal population changed. Maybe disease affected the group. Animal behavior can therefore function as an environmental signal. The animals are not simply inhabitants of the forest. They are indicators of its condition. And sometimes the signals are subtle. A change in vocalization, a shift in feeding locations, a different sleeping area, a change in group size, a change in migration. To an untrained observer, these details might appear meaningless. To a researcher who has studied the same group for years, they can become evidence. This is another example of why long-term observation matters. You cannot always understand a complex system by looking at it once. You have to watch it change. But the Congo also raises difficult questions about what happens when humans change the environment faster than natural systems can respond. Forest fragmentation is one example. A continuous forest provides connected habitat. When roads, farms, mines, or settlements divide that forest into smaller sections, the ecological relationships inside it can change. Animals that once moved freely may encounter barriers. Some species may avoid fragmented areas. Others may adapt. Plants may experience changes in pollination and seed dispersal. The edges of forests can experience different temperatures, humidity levels, and exposure to wind. A small change on a map can therefore create a large biological change on the ground. This is why conservation scientists often focus not only on how much forest remains, but on how connected it is. A forest can still look enormous from space while becoming increasingly fragmented at ground level. And this is one of the hidden dangers of measuring environmental change only by area. A number can tell you how much. It cannot always tell you what it means. The same principle applies to mining. A mining site may occupy a relatively small area compared with the entire Congo Basin. But its effects can extend beyond the physical boundaries of the excavation. Water flow can change. Sediment can move downstream. Roads can open access to previously isolated regions. Human settlements can grow around extraction sites. Additional pressure can then develop around the original operation. The result is a chain reaction. One activity creates another. One change creates new opportunities and new risks. This interconnectedness makes environmental management incredibly difficult. There is rarely one simple solution. Stopping one activity may protect the forest, but remove income from a community. Allowing unrestricted extraction may create jobs, but increase environmental damage. Building infrastructure may improve access to healthcare and education, while also opening previously protected habitats to further development. Every decision contains trade-offs, and the Congo exists at the center of many of these conflicts. It is a place where global environmental goals collide with local economic realities. The outside world wants the forest protected. People living there also need food, income, housing, transportation, healthcare, and opportunity. Any serious approach must consider both. This is why the Congo cannot be understood through one lens. It is not only an environmental story, it is also a human story. And some of the most powerful discoveries come from listening to the people who live there. For generations, forest communities have developed methods for identifying plants, tracking animals, predicting weather, navigating rivers, and recognizing environmental changes. This knowledge can be extraordinarily detailed. A person may identify an animal without seeing it simply from the sound of movement in vegetation. Another may recognize a river condition from changes in water color. Someone else may know which areas become dangerous during certain seasons. These skills can appear almost impossible to outsiders, but they are the result of continuous exposure. The human brain is capable of building highly specialized environmental knowledge when survival depends on it. This is why the concept of listening to the forest is so powerful. It describes a form of attention that goes beyond simply seeing. You hear, you smell, you feel changes in wind, you notice animal behavior, you recognize patterns in vegetation, you remember how the landscape looked during a previous season. Over time, these observations become connected. The forest becomes readable. But this knowledge should not be romanticized. It is not supernatural. It is expertise developed through experience. And understanding this distinction makes the story more fascinating, not less, because it demonstrates that humans can adapt their perception to environments that seem overwhelming to outsiders. Modern science is now beginning to examine many of these environmental signals using instruments. Acoustic sensors can monitor forests continuously. Camera traps can record wildlife without human presence. Satellite systems can measure vegetation changes. Remote sensors can track temperature and moisture. Artificial intelligence can identify patterns across enormous datasets. These technologies are changing how the Congo is studied. But they also reveal another problem. The amount of data is growing faster than our ability to interpret it. A single monitoring system can generate thousands of observations. Multiply that across an enormous rainforest, and the result becomes almost impossible to process manually. This is where machine learning and automated analysis become increasingly important. Algorithms can identify changes that human researchers might miss. They can compare images across years. They can detect unusual animal movement. They can identify acoustic patterns. They can help researchers determine where environmental changes are happening fastest. But algorithms have limitations too. A machine can identify a pattern. It cannot automatically determine its meaning. A change in vegetation might indicate drought, or flooding, or disease, or human activity, or a natural cycle. Context is still required. And this returns us to the central mystery of the Congo. Observation is not the same as understanding. Seeing more does not automatically mean knowing more. Sometimes it simply reveals how many questions were hidden before. This is why the future of Congo research may depend on combining different kinds of knowledge: satellite data, field science, local expertise, historical records, wildlife tracking, geological studies, climate research. All of these perspectives describe different parts of the same system. The more they overlap, the clearer the picture becomes. But complete clarity may never arrive, because the forest will continue changing while we study it. New generations of trees will grow, rivers will move, animals will adapt, human communities will change, climate conditions will shift, technology will improve, and the questions will evolve. Perhaps that is the deepest lesson of the Congo. Exploration is not a race toward a final answer. It is a process of reducing uncertainty. Every new observation removes one possibility and creates several more. Every discovery closes one question while opening another. And that is why the Congo remains so compelling. Not because it is a place where science has failed, but because it is a place where science is still actively learning. There are still species to study, habitats to monitor, historical questions to investigate, geological structures to understand, river systems to map, and environmental changes to track. The unknown is not necessarily a monster waiting in the darkness. Sometimes the unknown is simply a pattern we have not yet recognized. Sometimes it is a process happening too slowly to notice. Sometimes it is a relationship between two things we never thought to connect. And sometimes it is evidence that forces us to completely rethink what we believed before. That is what makes discovery powerful. The most important question is not whether the Congo contains something terrifying. It is whether we are prepared to look closely enough to understand what is already there. Because beneath the canopy, the forest is continuing its work. Rivers are moving. Animals are adapting. Trees are growing. Soils are changing. Communities are navigating the landscape. Technology is watching from above, Scientists are collecting evidence. And somewhere between all of these layers, another discovery is waiting. Maybe it will be dramatic. Maybe it will be completely ordinary. Maybe it will challenge an existing theory. Or maybe it will reveal that what looked mysterious was simply nature behaving in a way we had never observed before. Either way, the Congo will continue to remind us of one uncomfortable truth. The world is not fully understood simply because we can see it from space. A satellite can show us the forest. A sensor can record it. A computer can model it. But to truly understand a living system, we have to keep watching. And the longer we watch the Congo, the more obvious the final mystery becomes. The forest is not hiding one secret. It is hiding an entire network of relationships. And we have only begun to understand them. There is one final question that remains after everything we have seen. If the Congo Basin has already revealed so much, how much could still be waiting beyond the limits of observation? Not necessarily monsters, not lost cities made of gold, not supernatural forces hiding beneath the trees. Something more difficult to define. A living system so enormous and interconnected that every answer seems to reveal another layer. For centuries, the Congo was described by outsiders as a place of darkness and mystery. But that description was incomplete. The forest was never truly empty or unknown to the people who lived within it. Communities navigated its rivers, recognized its seasons, understood its animals, and developed knowledge that allowed them to survive in conditions that could overwhelm an outsider within hours. The real mystery was never that the Congo had no explanation. The mystery was how much there was to explain. And modern science is only beginning to see the full scale of that challenge. One of the most important discoveries is hidden in something that seems ordinary, the forest canopy. From above, the canopy can look like an uninterrupted ocean of green. But beneath that surface are countless layers of biological activity. Trees compete for light. Vines connect different levels of vegetation. Insects move between branches. Birds occupy different heights. Primates travel through the canopy. Microorganisms break down organic matter. Rainwater moves from leaves to soil and eventually into rivers. Every layer influences another. A single tree is not simply a tree. It is habitat. It can provide food, shelter, nesting space, and pathways for other organisms. When it falls, the effects spread outward. Light reaches the forest floor. New plants begin to grow. Insects respond. Animals change movement patterns. One fallen tree can create a miniature ecological transformation. Multiply that across millions of hectares, and the scale becomes almost impossible to imagine. This is why the Congo is so important to climate research. The rainforest stores enormous amounts of carbon within its vegetation and soils. When forests remain intact, that carbon remains part of a functioning ecosystem. When forests are damaged or removed, some of that carbon can return to the atmosphere. But carbon is only one part of the story. The forest also participates in the movement of water. Trees release moisture into the atmosphere. Rain falls. Water enters the soil. Rivers transport it across the landscape. The cycle continues. Disrupt one part of the system, and the effects can spread. This is why environmental researchers increasingly think about forests as active participants in climate systems rather than passive landscapes. And the Congo is one of the most important examples. But perhaps the most surprising discovery is that the forest can also influence human history. Rivers have always shaped movement. Communities developed around waterways because rivers provide transportation, food, and access to surrounding regions. Trade routes followed water. Settlements developed near resources. Knowledge spread along these networks. What appears on a modern map as a remote rainforest may once have been part of a much larger human network. This changes the way we should think about the idea of lost places. A settlement does not have to disappear because everyone suddenly vanished. It can disappear because routes changed. Resources shifted. Flood patterns changed. People moved. Vegetation reclaimed structures. Over generations, memory of the exact location can fade. Eventually, the forest becomes the only visible evidence. But even when physical traces disappear, human influence can sometimes remain. Researchers can study soil. They can examine pollen. They can analyze charcoal. They can investigate vegetation patterns. They can compare genetic evidence. History can survive in fragments. And the Congo is full of fragments. This is why new archaeological and environmental methods could continue changing our understanding of Central Africa. A discovery does not always look like a building. Sometimes it looks like a chemical signature in soil. Sometimes it looks like an unusual plant community. Sometimes it is a pattern hidden inside satellite imagery. Sometimes it is DNA. Sometimes it is a story passed between generations. And sometimes it is simply the realization that an old assumption was wrong. That is what makes exploration so powerful. It does not merely reveal new things. It changes the meaning of things we thought we already understood. But there is another side to this story. The same forest that preserves traces of history is also under pressure from the present. Mining, agriculture, logging, infrastructure, hunting, and climate change can alter ecosystems. Some impacts are easy to see. Others are almost invisible. A road may appear to occupy a narrow line through the forest, but roads change access. Once access improves, more human activity can follow. Settlements can expand. Resources become easier to extract. Wildlife movement can change. The forest becomes increasingly connected to external markets. This creates a chain reaction that can extend far beyond the original project. And it creates a difficult question. How do you protect one of the world's most important ecosystems while also improving the lives of the people who depend on it? There is no simple answer. Conservation without local economic opportunity can create conflict. Development without environmental safeguards can create long-term damage. The challenge is finding systems where communities benefit from protecting natural resources rather than being forced to choose between survival and conservation. This is one reason local knowledge is so important. People who depend directly on forests understand their value in ways that cannot always be measured by satellite imagery. A forest is food, medicine, building material, transportation, cultural memory, habitat, income, and protection from environmental extremes. Destroying it can mean losing much more than trees. At the same time, the Congo cannot be frozen in time. People need development. They need roads, healthcare, schools, electricity, economic opportunity. The future of the basin depends on finding a balance between these needs. And this is where the story becomes much bigger than mystery. It becomes a question about civilization itself. How much can humanity take from an ecosystem before the system begins to change in ways we cannot easily reverse? The Congo gives us a rare opportunity to study that question while the process is still unfolding. We can observe ecosystems under pressure. We can compare protected areas with disturbed landscapes. We can track changes over time. We can learn which species adapt and which struggle. We can identify which policies work and which fail. The forest is giving us information. The question is whether we will listen. And perhaps this is the most important meaning behind the phrase, listening to the forest. It is not about hearing a mysterious voice. It is about paying attention before the signal becomes impossible to ignore. A river changing. A species disappearing from an area. A forest becoming fragmented. A soil system being disturbed. A local community losing access to traditional resources. These are signals. They may be subtle at first, but subtle does not mean unimportant. In a complex system, small changes can accumulate. That is another lesson the Congo teaches. The most dangerous changes are not always dramatic. Sometimes they happen quietly. One tree at a time, one mine at a time, one road at a time, one season at a time, until the landscape looks different. And by the time the change becomes obvious, reversing it may be much harder. But there is still another reason the Congo remains one of the most fascinating places on Earth. Its biological diversity continues to challenge what we know. Every species exists within a network. Remove one species and another may be affected. Change vegetation and food availability changes. Change food availability and animal movement changes. Change animal movement and seed dispersal changes. Change seed dispersal and forest regeneration changes. The system moves through feedback loops. This is why a rainforest cannot be understood simply by counting species. You have to understand relationships, and those relationships can be incredibly difficult to measure. Some may occur over days, others over decades. Some operate underground. Others occur high above the forest floor. Some involve organisms so small that they cannot be seen without specialized equipment. Others involve animals moving across enormous territories. The Congo contains all of these scales simultaneously, and that is why even advanced technology has limits. Satellites see the surface. Sensors record conditions. Cameras capture moments. Genetic analysis reveals relationships. Models predict possibilities. But no single tool sees the entire system at once. There is always another layer. And perhaps that is why the idea of 30 discoveries is misleading in the best possible way. 30 discoveries sound like a list. But the Congo does not behave like a list. Everything connects. A river mystery connects to ecology. Ecology connects to climate. Climate connects to vegetation. Vegetation connects to wildlife. Wildlife connects to human activity. Human activity connects to mining. Mining connects to global technology. Technology connects back to environmental pressure. History connects to archaeology. Archaeology connects to landscape change. Local knowledge connects to environmental observation. Scientific research connects to all of it. The deeper you go, the harder it becomes to separate one discovery from another. They are pieces of the same system. And perhaps this is where the greatest mystery finally appears. Not what is hidden in the Congo, but what happens when we realize that the entire environment is interacting in ways that are too complex for any single explanation. The forest does not wait for us to understand it. It continues. While scientists analyze yesterday's data, rainfall changes today's landscape. While satellites map one region, vegetation changes another. While researchers study one species, another moves into a new habitat. While governments debate conservation, communities continue making decisions based on immediate survival. The system never pauses. That is why knowledge in the Congo must remain flexible. A conclusion made today may be revised tomorrow. A model may improve. A new technology may reveal something previously invisible. A field study may challenge an assumption. This is not a weakness. It is how science works when studying a living system. The goal is not to pretend certainty. The goal is to become less wrong over time. And perhaps the Congo is one of the best places on Earth to learn that lesson, because it forces us to confront the limits of human perception. We like boundaries. We like categories. We like answers. We want to know where something begins and where it ends. But in the Congo, boundaries are often fluid. Forest becomes wetland. Wetland becomes river. River changes course. Animals cross regions. Humans reshape landscapes. Seasons transform accessibility. History disappears beneath vegetation and later returns through scientific evidence. Nothing remains completely isolated. Everything overlaps. And that is why the final discovery is not a hidden object. It is a change in perspective. The Congo Basin is not mysterious because it has escaped science. It is mysterious because science has shown us just how much complexity exists within a single ecosystem. Every new tool makes the forest more visible, but increased visibility does not make it simpler. It makes the hidden relationships clearer. It shows more species, more interactions, more changes, more connections, more questions. And perhaps that is exactly what exploration should do. Not make the world smaller, make our understanding larger. The Congo reminds us that there are still places where technology does not provide instant certainty. There are still landscapes where direct observation is difficult. There are still ecosystems where long-term research is essential. There are still historical questions waiting for evidence. There are still species whose behavior we do not fully understand. There are still communities whose knowledge deserves deeper recognition. And there are still environmental decisions whose consequences may not become visible for generations. That is why the Congo matters. Not only because it is remote, not only because it is dangerous, not only because it contains extraordinary wildlife and resources, but because it represents a challenge to the idea that humanity has already mapped and understood the planet. We have mapped much of it. We have measured much of it. We have photographed it from space. But mapping is not the same as understanding. A satellite can show a forest. It cannot automatically explain what the forest means to the people who live there. A sensor can detect a change. It cannot automatically tell us whether that change is dangerous. A camera can record an animal. It cannot fully capture the ecological network surrounding it. A model can predict. It cannot guarantee. Understanding requires context, and context requires time. So when you think about the Congo Basin after this journey, do not imagine a dark place filled with impossible secrets. Imagine something more extraordinary. A living system that has been developing for thousands, perhaps millions of years. A network of rivers, forests, animals, soils, communities, climates, and histories. A place where the past can survive beneath vegetation, where the present is shaped by global demand, and where the future depends on decisions being made both inside and far beyond the forest. The terrifying part is not that the Congo contains things we cannot explain. The terrifying part is realizing how quickly the things we do understand can disappear if we stop paying attention. A species can decline. A habitat can fragment. A river can change. A traditional route can vanish. A historical clue can be destroyed. A forest can be damaged long before the world realizes what has been lost. And once something disappears, understanding it becomes much harder. That is why discovery and preservation are connected. You cannot study what no longer exists. You cannot understand a species after its habitat has disappeared. You cannot reconstruct every part of a lost ecosystem. And you cannot always recover knowledge once it has been forgotten. The Congo therefore leaves us with a responsibility, not to conquer it, not to expose every hidden corner simply because technology allows us to, but to understand it carefully, to study without destroying, to investigate without assuming, to respect local knowledge, to protect ecosystems while recognizing human needs, and to accept that some questions require time. Because the Congo is still changing. Tomorrow the forest will be different from today. Another riverbank may shift. Another tree will fall. Another animal will move. Another expedition will collect new data. Another scientist will notice a pattern. And somewhere beneath that enormous canopy, another piece of the puzzle may be waiting. Maybe it will confirm something researchers already suspected. Maybe it will completely change an existing theory. Or maybe it will create a question that nobody expected. That is the nature of the Congo. It does not provide a final chapter. It provides another beginning. And perhaps after everything we have explored, the most powerful discovery is this: Earth is still full of places that remind us we are not finished learning. The Congo Basin is one of them. A place where rivers continue to move, forests continue to breathe, animals continue to adapt, communities continue to survive, and science continues to search. 30 discoveries may give us 30 stories. But behind every story is a much larger system. And behind that system is a simple truth. We do not know everything. Not even close. The maps can become more detailed. The satellites can become sharper. The sensors can become smarter. The models can become more accurate. But the world itself will continue changing. And as long as it does, discovery will never truly end. So the next time you see the Congo Basin on a map, remember what that green shape actually represents. Not an empty space. Not a forgotten wilderness. Not a place waiting to be conquered. But one of Earth's most complex living systems. A place where history, science, nature, technology, and human survival meet. A place that has already revealed extraordinary discoveries. And a place that may still have thousands more. Because the Congo does not end with an answer. It ends with a question. How much of our planet have we truly understood? And how much have